Hello everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Jazmin Morris and I've got a short talk prepared for you today as part of the Technology and Power, Rights, Resistance and Reimaginings conference. I hope you have enjoyed all of the talks so far and I hope that you enjoy this one as well. Thank you very much for joining us. So a big hello from me. I'm really honoured to be here, a part of this fantastic conference alongside some very inspiring people. So thank you very much for having me and tuning in. I'm going to start by speaking about my practice a little bit, both my academic practice and my creative practice. And then I'm going to kind of move on to explain the relationships between the concepts that I address and, the amazing kind of themes that this conference is addressing. So let's start off by me kind of unpacking my practice. So I'm a creative computing artist and educator. So I studied fine art actually, which kind of taught me to be very conceptual. I did enjoy the space to explore my practice in such depth on a BA in fine art. But very quickly, I developed a kind of technology-focused practice. I actually started off by I still am really addressing how identity is simulated in cyberspace, particularly themes of power, actually, and culture and gender, and how that, who are the kind of gatekeepers of how we now are able to identify in cyberspace. So I was really fixated on that, and I've been fixated on that for years, and I explore it in many different ways. And of course, the tech space, the creative computing space is a really broad space, and it's led me down so many exciting angles. Of course, I've, touched on machine learning and artificial intelligence, web development, kind of working a little bit in design, even policy and ethics and that side of things. I do a lot of speaking at conferences actually. And I'm going to go on to explain how all of this led to a role in academia as well. But yeah, my practice is super broad. I explore this in loads of different ways. Sometimes it's led by interface. And sometimes it's led by kind of digital assets and what these artifacts look like. So yeah, I am a practicing artist. However, I'm sure that most artists will understand that it's really difficult to find the time. But when I do, I still absolutely love making work. So when I was kind of looking at this idea of simulation, the thing that really stood out to me is that, especially without expansive digital literacy and technological understanding, you're not actually in charge of your own identity. And I started to think about who is, and it's the people that develop the software and the applications in which we're using, right? And so I kind of came to the conclusion that, maybe through knowledge exchange, skill sharing and education, maybe more people can be empowered to kind of create their own identity, be that through creating platforms, pieces of software, or even kind of extending on existing software. And of course, it all boils down to having more diverse tech teams before things go out. But, I wanted to do something about it now. And, I kind of learn some skills. I'm definitely not an expert in anything, but I learned some skills whilst I was studying just to kind of express myself artistically. And then I kind of naturally started sharing these skills with peers, and then kind of, teachers at the university were like, actually, can you come and run a workshop for us over here? And it all really organically happened, but it felt good. It felt like it was supporting my practice, because sharing skills, did empower people, and ideally in the future it will lead to people feeling more empowered to have agency over their own identity and choose how that is simulated. So fast forward, and I'm kind of going around running workshops I started to touch on game development because, of course, the avatar is really prominent in game development. So I work a lot with games design software. I'm running workshops, Tate, Somerset House, University of the Arts London, and very slowly but surely I was sucked into the world of academia because I had a passion and a gift for teaching, and that's where I'm at now. I've got several roles in academia here at the Creative Computing Institute, actually, and over at Central St Martin's on the graphic design course. And I get myself involved in as much as I possibly can. I'll speak more later about a kind of program that I run that actually works with young people, but it's still supported by the university. This idea of skill sharing and knowledge exchange really is the core of my practice. So although I do make work sometimes, every single workshop that I do, every single lesson that I teach, every single conversation that I have feels like a part of my practice. I feel like it has become really educational, actually. I work in academia. Collaboration is on here because it really is a core to my practice, and that can be community collaboration or collaborating with other artists. I think that I'm addressing such wide themes. It's really important to get diverse opinions in the room when I'm making work, and I just generally enjoy it. And also industry collaboration, right? Because I came from a fine art background, and then I'm now working in academia, so already there's a crossover there between the creative industry and academia, as with many of us working at creative institutions. But then, of course, there was this there was the whole tech industry, right? I remember when I was first understanding what my practice was, and I went to so many tech events, like, women in tech and people of colour in tech and all of these big bougie tech events in central London, and was learning a lot about hardware and software and developers. And of course, that experience actually, enhanced my practice, and it was a real first-hand experience of how, cis, white and male the tech industry was, because these networking events, I was, the only person that looked like me there. So that really informed my practice anyway. But yeah, there's a almost medium disciplinary collaboration going along, as well as collaborating with individuals. I've already explained knowledge exchange and how important it is and how it feeds into the way that I approach academia. I have quite a non-hierarchical feel to the way that I share knowledge. I don't like to speak down at people. I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other as humans. And of course, I'm going to go on to speak about how knowledge and power are related. Outreach. So I'll speak about, what I do with outreach. It still feels really inherent to my practice, as much as it's important to it was important for me to share these skills and point people in the direction of skills as well. I'm not this know-it-all. But I also wanted to work with diverse communities. I wanted to work with young people. I wanted to work with the general public. I wanted to work with people that are out of work at the moment, potentially refugees. I'm really interested in working with a range of communities, the queer community, people of colour. I've done loads of that, and I continue to do that. And it feels really amazing to be able to say that the Creative Computing Institute fund me to run Tech Yard, which is a really cute little after-school club. This is for young people aged 10 to 13 that are based in Southwark, because that's where our campus is. And every week we go in and learn creative computing skills. I get session leaders in. We've had some fantastic session leaders. We've been really lucky to have some of the visitors that we've got. And it's a really broad umbrella, right? So one week we'll be doing electronics. The next week we'll be doing programming. The next week we'll be doing game design. And yeah, it's absolutely fabulous. And I think that Tech Yard is growing, and I'm really interested in using its kind of brand to reach out to, new communities and kind of create this really wide network of people that feel empowered about creative computing. And I really hope that there's a kind of life cycle in it of people coming back and teaching sessions. And knowledge exchange is really inherent to this program as well. So that is more than enough about me now. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to move on to kind of speaking about some of the prompts and questions that have found me at this particular conference. Maybe you're starting to already kind of pull it together. Some of the things that are on my mind at the moment. So I'm just going to expand on these points and see where the conversation goes. So can education shift power dynamics? I think I want to explain what I mean by education, because I think that word to a certain extent is quite inaccessible. Sometimes I refer to what I do as informal education, not when I'm working at the university, but I think outside of that, creating these safe yet informal spaces is really important to me. So even in just the way that delivery is managed and what that person looks like is really important to me. This idea of a kind of flat hierarchy, and a kind of code of conduct that tries its absolute best not to allow any abuse, adopting things that are really important into the way that knowledge is shared. Education is an interesting one, but I think this idea of knowledge sharing, yes, can shift power dynamics, and that's what I want to unpack through this program, and it's what I'm unpacking in my practice anyway. And actually, I want to speak about the next point because, yes, it can shift power dynamics. There's that old saying of knowledge is power, but what knowledge is valuable? And I'm really starting to question that. I have to understand that my practice is an ongoing thing and it's never going to be stationary. So something that felt like an answer after my kind of big bout of research into, identity in cyberspace, this idea, okay, sharing skills, empowering people, and it worked for so long. But recently I've been questioning how valuable are these skills actually, especially as I start to work with different types of communities. I mean, to be completely transparent, when I'm kind of collaborating with charities and they say, look, we'd love to have you in to run a session, but once the attendees of this workshop leave the workshop, they don't have a laptop to continue working on it. So actually, how valuable is it teaching them basic HTML or teaching them basic 3D design? And it's actually a really kind of sensitive thing for me personally to process this, because one half of me believes in sharing this digital knowledge and continuing to do that, but I'm also really aware of what is relevant and what is beneficial. And I think what I'm learning is that changes from community to community, and it's kind of speaking to wider things in my mind now about how libraries could potentially be innovated to allow access. I know they all have computers, but why are they not quite working, ignoring the pandemic? I mean, before that and post-pandemic, hopefully. Why do internet cafes kind of feel and look the way that they do? Why aren't they not these spaces that are full of people using the internet and using the hardware that's in there and kind of learning and sharing skills together and getting people like me in to come and run sessions? And I think it all, boils down to this. I mean, of course, it's politics, right? And what parts of digital are well funded and what parts aren't is also really interesting. But yeah, to kind of round up what I'm saying, for me now it's asking myself and others, how can digital be truly beneficial? And yes, I think it does vary, but I understand that I have to be really adaptive with my practice to ensure that I'm listening to what the communities need before I come in and kind of have this performative tech is great. You can do this with p5.js. So yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to working through that almost frustration and finding out what is needed with particular communities. And, you know, it might be CV workshops. I've even started thinking about kind of training on fake news, training on privacy for smartphones. What hardware does the community have and what is relevant to teach on it, and how can I adapt my practice to that? So I just wanted to kind of, you know, TechYard, of course, is an example of how, you know, these amazing young people are learning really fun things, and they send me things in the week, what they've made on the software. And I feel like that works, and that's great, and that's one thing. But it was with a conversation with UAL for All, which is a program that I'm a part of that does work with, you know, various charities, that, you know, again, this issue became prevalent of, you know, how useful is creative computing going to be, right? And what is creative computing, and how can we unpack that term and adapt it for particular needs? And I also wanted to just shout out a fantastic initiative, which is Stem the Violence. And I think this is another way of kind of seeing how digital can be beneficial. And, you know, this initiative is kind of created to excite young people and kind of, you know, keep them off the streets, which I think is great. And I think that, well, I don't believe that young people should be kept off the streets, actually. I'm not going to say that, but I understand that there's a need for some sort of implications to keep young people entertained and excited. And of course, you know, STEM can be one of them, as long as it's fun, and as long as it's welcoming. And this is where I kind of start to link it back to places like internet cafes. And I wonder why these can't be activated as almost youth clubs in the evenings. So yeah, big hopes, big dreams, loads of ideas at the moment. And yeah, I think it's clear that my practice is in a really interesting space and a very kind of transparent space. And that's why I'm really happy to open it up and receive as much knowledge as possible, and work through this with communities and with other academics and creatives and technologists, and really see where this kind of power shift can go. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of speak about accessibility and digital literacy, because of course this comes into it as well. So how accessible is hardware? As I said, what hardware do people have at home? What hardware do people have access to? How accessible is the software? I think that a lot of the time this comes down to interface, costings, and yeah, digital literacy and understanding what that is. You know, I work primarily in the UK at the moment, but again, you know, I would love to work globally and really unpack this on a more global sense, because I'm very aware of how Eurocentric things can be. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that to kind of point out that it's an undercurrent in my thinking. So another thing that I've been thinking about is the tech industry safe? And the short answer is no. What do I mean by safe? Well, I don't think that it is safe for people of colour. I don't think it's safe for neurodiverse people. I don't think it's safe for queer people. And that's because, you know, and many more, because, I mean, the society that we live in is institutionally racist, homophobic, you know, and so no industry is safe, really. And I've got first-hand experience of that. But the tech industry, because of, you know, the history of technology and how entitled and inaccessible it has been, you know, originally it was mathematicians, politicians, and the military playing with technology. No one else had access to it at all. And I believe that that has really kind of infiltrated how the tech industry has moved forward into modern day. So of course, it's all well and good inspiring people to go into STEM and inspiring people to go into creative computing. And as I said, I will continue to do that, because I know deep down that it's a great thing, but I also think the work needs to be done to ensure that the industry is safe once we get there, because, you know, at the moment it's not, and the products that come out of it are not safe either. I'm sure you've heard of many accounts of that. I wanted to quickly speak about power as a eukaryote system. I hope I pronounced that wrong. So this is me kind of really rounding up where I'm at with this thinking. And, you know, this kind of system, I know fungi is a part of it, and there are a few other, two scientific words for me to pronounce, but they're cells, right, basically, and they're cells that can exist as one, or they can exist as a system. And the system is kind of self-nourishing. Often in nature, we see a kind of greed and selfishness. It's like, you know, everyone for themselves. But with eukaryote systems, they kind of feed each other when they're working as a network, and they would rather all be half full than one be full and one die. And I think that we can learn a lot from this and fungi, and kind of look at ways to feed off each other, be that through knowledge. And I think if we look at power as a system like that, we at the moment are not working like this. We have someone at the top and we have people at the bottom with no power. And how can we learn from existing beautiful things in nature? And shout out to Ashley Jane Lewis, actually, for introducing me to slime mold, which has led to my, you know, slime mold is another thing that has this eukaryote system. And yeah, how can we spread power in that way, in a kind of, again, non-hierarchical way? And I'm really interested in exploring that and kind of working from the ground up, right? Hopefully we'll start to see the changes in 5 to 10 years. And lastly, regrowth as a power distribution concept. And what I mean there is how regrowth and recycling, as opposed to this kind of consumeristic, fast, new society that we are upholding at the moment, how can we distribute power through regrowth? And, you know, it's kind of thinking we're throwing hardware away, we're throwing knowledge away, and who then gets access to that, and how can we build that up as a kind of power system. So yeah, almost the waste from people in power and repurposing that, and, you know, spreading knowledge from the bottom up. And yeah, looking at, you know, some of the new ways of thinking around how actually this idea of recycling becomes beneficial individually and for those around you, and of course for the world that we live in. So how can that distribute power in a really kind of unexpected way? So thank you so much for listening. I hope all of that made sense. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and, you know, I'm on socials. If you want to chat to me about anything, I'm always around. Thank you very much.